Okay, this is my Egypt Human Rights Project where I gave Egypt a grade on their human rights. So the grade I ended up giving them was a D. I'll go into the reasons why in a second, but just for reference, that's where Egypt is. It's relatively big, and they have a lot of human rights issues that we will be getting into. So for background, the three main issues that I found was ISIS versus Sinai, freedom of speech, and abuse of political prisoners. So just for a little more like background on these issues. So there's ongoing issues with the ISIS and the Sinai people. They have there's a lot of tension, and the government isn't involved or doesn't have a side in this, but their response or lack thereof is very the government isn't helping or doing anything about it, which is giving a certain group more power. So the Egyptian government is hiding the violence that's happening from other countries because they don't want to be seen as looked down upon. And as we'll go further into this, we'll find that a lot of the times the Egyptian government really cares about their appearance on the outside, but they don't really care about helping their people very much. So this is another just a quote from the president. The issue has ended in quotations because it hasn't ended and it's not even close to ending. And I don't know, I thought that was a very important aspect because you can really see how he's trying to defer the issue when there's still a huge issue. So another thing from the government is if you criticize the government in any way, it can lead to arrest, torture, and even death. And then some of the targets are women, children, and people in the LGBTQ plus community are subject to discrimination. And then the government has had a huge issue with silencing ideas from other people, and they only listen to ideas that they want to hear. So it was really hard to find a current news report on the Egyptian human rights movement. So I got a report from the U.S. Department of State, and what they're kind of bringing up is the failures of the government to protect its people from mistreatment, while kind of adding to the mistreatment because they're not listening to the people and the people aren't being heard. There's multiple accounts of the government of its agents committing crimes without punishment or backlash. So the government itself is also part of the issue. It's not just not protecting its people, but they are also making arrests and silencing their people. Large numbers of forced disappearances, which means the people are going missing. Some people are going missing without any explanation of why or what happened to them. There's torture and inhumane cruelty, arrest of the innocent, and denial of fair public trials, which is a big issue. The trials they've been having for people are very unfair, and they only allow people to speak that they know are going to be on their side. So moving on. So more of the actual issue of the ISIS and Sunni people. So they've been fighting to levels of non-international armed conflict, violating international laws of war and local and international human rights violations. There's a failure to distinguish citizens from combatants on both sides, causing escalating militarization and displacement. Lots of the Sani citizens have to flee their homes, and now tens of thousands of them are barred from returning. So basically what this is saying is a lot of the times the people of ISIS and the people of Sani are very like they look like normal citizens, so you can't tell who they are. So this is causing a lot of more violence on innocent civilians because they can get mixed up very easily. And the government is like the Egyptian government is saying that, oh, like a ton of the innocent civilians that are being killed had like maybe possibly been a part of one of the sides, trying to say that like it trying to say that these aren't innocent civilians, trying to protect the fact that their government is kind of falling apart. And then the government response in 1981, Egypt returned to a state of emergency, or entered, ending in 2021 after Islamic groups became violent, leading to restrictions of freedoms, thoughts, and beliefs. The Egyptian government refused to release amount of citizens killed in the crossfire. They also covered many innocent deaths by claiming they were allegedly militants. That's what I was just going into. And in 2021, Egyptian government launched a national human rights strategy in hopes of preventing more violations. They also claimed that 2021 was the year of civil society, which from the outside perspective, it really looks, based on these two ending statements, that the government is trying to help and is trying to get better, but they kind of put these regulations or strategies in place but don't actually follow through with them or actually do anything. They just kind of state that they're there, which isn't really helping the government whatsoever or the people at all. So kind of what my thoughts are: the government cares about their looks, not really their people. A lot of cover up, launching strategies that just make things worse. They're using a lot of propaganda to try to just like suppress what their people think or the ideas that the people have. They're arresting peaceful protesters. This is actually a really important aspect to me personally because they're releasing. So they went back and released a ton of protesters or like activism people, and to try to like look better, but then they went back on that and they tripled the number of released and captured them and arrested them. So that goes into the next point: how prisoners are treated. There's a lot of mistreatment, prolonged consolidatory confinement, denial of health care, and torture of people who just didn't really do anything and had unfair trials that forced them to be prisoners. Khalid Dia was the head prosecutor, trying to hide the amount of human rights violations that were really taking place with no punishment. So the public's response. So there's been lots of protesting throughout the history of Egypt. 1983 started the AOHR, the Arab Organization of Human Rights. They wanted to aid the countries against political and civil decay, provided difficult regimes, suppression of political expression and participation. In 1985, Egyptian Organization of Human Rights really took charge after President Sabat got assassinated by a group called the Egyptian Islamic, sorry I might butcher this, but Jihad. That was just a peace treaty, because they were mad about a peace treaty with the US and Israel, but that is debated. They don't really know if that's why he got assassinated, but that's what people kind of assume. But there could have been other factors that kind of led to that. Deteriorating human rights and political impasse. 1985 started the period of Egyptian human rights movement, which is like a branch off of the OHR, and there ended up being lots of branches off of the main organization because there had been lots of debates on whether how we should handle it, how peaceful, how violent that they should be. So there's a lot of different organizations that kind of popped off of the main one, all fighting for the same thing, but just fighting kind of in little different ways. Human Rights Watch's launched a 2-year investigation documenting the mass arrests, unlawful air and ground attacks on innocent civilians, torture, and more. So Human Rights Watches is a organization that kind of looks into human rights in different places. So that was like something they did for Egypt and found lots of human rights violations. And then this over here is just some of the important people who had to do with the organizations I just talked about, like some of the leaders and stuff. So these are just some of their ideas. They wanted to form relationships between human rights activists and political parties. The internal structure, which I kind of talked about, because there was differing ideas. They wanted to try to get everyone on the same page about how they should fight and when they should fight, which proved to be difficult, but they wanted to get that under wraps. Foreign funding and abuse of power from the political regimes. And then what about now? In 2023, May 3rd, sparked a national dialogue, which is structured to be top to bottom power dynamic, which means a lot of different national dialogues happen a lot of different ways, but this was top to bottom, which means the top had a lot of power and they kind of forced the bottom, which would be the people, compared to government. The government kind of forced the people to not have a voice in this dialogue, even though that was the whole point. But again, I think this was mainly for looks on the outside to be like, hey, we're trying, but they're not really trying. The government's main goal was to issue recommendations to the president directly. This was strictly controlled, meaning voices of the government did not want to hear from, like the voices that the government did not want to hear from were not going to be heard from. They wanted new ideas that aided the country in overcoming political and economic issues, but not really taking into account social issues, which is the main point of what I'm trying to get out here. So, justification for the grade, freedom of speech, they're silencing their people completely, and just making the people not have voices and not be able to protest. And when they do protest, there's a lot of getting arrested, a lot of unfair treatment in the prisons. So freedom of speech has really been violated here. The ISIS First Sani issue, there's a lot of innocent people getting killed over issues that just don't have to do with them at all. It's hard to tell like who is a part of which group, which is causing a lot of innocent civilians to get killed. And then abuse of prisoners, when people do get arrested for things like freedom of speech violations, they're getting mistreated, they're getting tortured. A lot of nasty things are happening in those prisons. So overall, I just think that Egypt deserves a D because they're just not taking care of their people. Again, I think I would have given them a C, but I honestly think because there was so much taking away from, like, they wanted to look good so bad that they're really suppressing their people, made them go to a D. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Have a good day.